The courtyard fell silent as Alara was led toward the pyre, her bare feet leaving traces of blood on the cold stone beneath her. 3 days in the dungeons had left her weak, bruised, and hollow, but she refused to let them see her break. The chains around her wrists felt heavier than the weight of the false accusations that had brought her here, but she kept her chin high as hundreds of eyes watched her final walk. She had served the palace for 5 years as nothing more than a shadow, an omega, without a wolf, cleaning floors and emptying chamber pots while avoiding the cruel hands and crueler words of those who saw her as less than dirt. Now she would die as she had lived, invisible and forgotten, except this time the entire kingdom had gathered to watch. King Kieran stood on the royal platform, his massive frame radiating the kind of power that made alphas bow and omegas tremble. His silver eyes, cold as winter frost, tracked her movement with an expression carved from granite. He had personally ordered this execution after his advisors presented evidence of her treason, poison found in her quarters meant for the royal family, letters of conspiracy with enemy pacts written in her hand. She had screamed her innocence until her voice broke, but no one listened to an omega without a wolf, without a family, without worth. The trial by fire was reserved for the gravest offenses, an ancient ritual where the accused would step into flames and only divine intervention could save them. In 300 years, no one had survived it. The head executioner, a scarred beta named Corvus, grabbed her arm with unnecessary force and dragged her the final steps to the wooden platform surrounded by oil-soaked kindling. The crowd murmured with anticipation, some faces eager for the spectacle, others merely curious, none sympathetic. Alara's eyes swept across them all and found nothing but indifference or disgust. She had grown up in the Pack's orphanage after her mother died in childbirth, never knowing her father, never developing a wolf when puberty came and went. The other children had tormented her. The adults had ignored her. And when she turned 16, she was sent to the palace to work until her body gave out, or someone decided she was no longer useful. This was how her story ended, not with gentle hands or kind words, but with fire and false justice. Before you continue this journey with us, if you enjoy stories of hidden power and fated love that transcends past betrayals, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more tales of redemption and romance that will set your heart ablaze. Kieran watched as Corvus bound her to the central post, the Omega's small frame seeming even more fragile against the mountain of wood and accelerant. Something uncomfortable twisted in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that felt almost like doubt. He had ruled for 10 years with absolute authority, his decisions swift and final, his judgment trusted by all. When his beta commander and chief advisor had brought him the evidence against this Omega, he had barely glanced at it before signing the execution order. Traitors deserved death, and the method didn't matter to him. Yet now, watching her standing there with her dark hair matted with dungeon filth and her green eyes staring directly at him without fear, he felt that strange pull in his chest intensify. He had never seen her before 3 days ago. That palace employed hundreds of servants, and Omegas without wolves were beneath his notice. Yet something about her face seemed to whisper of forgotten dreams and memories that weren't his own. Corvus raised the ceremonial torch, its flames dancing in the afternoon breeze, and the crowd held its collective breath. This was the moment where the accused would typically beg for mercy, plead their case one final time, offer confessions in exchange for a quicker death. Alara did none of these things. Instead, she looked directly at Kieran and spoke with a voice that somehow carried across the entire courtyard, despite being barely above a whisper. "I forgive you for this, my king. You do not know what you do. But the truth will burn brighter than these flames. And when it does, I hope you can forgive yourself." The words struck him like a physical blow, and for a moment his composure cracked. Confusion, and something that might have been shame flickering across his features before his mask of control slammed back into place. The torch touched the kindling, and flames erupted with supernatural speed, fed by the oils and accelerants until they formed a roaring inferno that consumed the platform in seconds. The heat was so intense that the front rows of spectators stumbled backward, shielding their faces. Kieran's enhanced alpha vision allowed him to see through the flames better than most, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Alara had closed her eyes as the fire reached her, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer, or perhaps a goodbye to a life that had shown her nothing but cruelty. The flames climbed her body, wrapping around her legs, her torso, her arms, and then something impossible happened. The fire didn't burn her. Instead of charring flesh and agonized screams, the flames began to move with purpose, spiraling around her body like living ribbons of light. They caressed her skin gently, almost lovingly, and where they touched, the dirt and blood and bruises vanished, leaving behind skin that glowed with an inner radiance. The chains around her wrists heated to white-hot metal and melted away, the liquid iron never touching her flesh as it dripped harmlessly to the burning platform below. Alara's eyes opened, and they were no longer the dull green of a broken omega, but blazing emerald fire that seemed to look into the soul of every person watching. Her dark hair lifted in a wind that existed only around her, and across her arms, her shoulders, her collarbone, intricate marks began to appear, glowing with golden red light, as if drawn by the hand of the gods themselves. The crowd erupted into chaos, voices screaming about witchcraft and divine intervention, people pushing and shoving to either get closer or flee in terror. Kieran's elite guards formed a protective barrier around the royal platform, but the king himself couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman in the flames who was transforming before his eyes. The marks on her skin were ancient symbols he recognized from the oldest texts in the royal library, the marks of the Ignis bloodline, the dynasty that had ruled these lands for 1,000 years before his great-great-grandfather had led a rebellion and slaughtered them to the last child, or so everyone believed. The Ignis wolves had been fire elementals, capable of calling flames to their will, impervious to heat and burning, their power so great that it took a coordinated attack by 5 allied packs to bring them down. If this Omega carried Ignis blood, if she was somehow a survivor of that ancient line, then everything changed. The evidence against her, the convenient discovery of poison and treasonous letters, suddenly seemed far too orchestrated, too perfect. Someone had wanted her dead. Someone who knew what she was, or feared what she might become. Kieran's mind raced through the implications while his wolf, the beast he had kept under iron control for years, suddenly surged forward with a possessive snarl that shocked him to his core. Mine. His wolf growled with absolute certainty, the word echoing through every fiber of his being. The bond, the fated mate connection he had always dismissed as weakness and fantasy, snapped into place so powerfully that he staggered, gripping the railing of the royal platform to stay upright. The flames around Alara suddenly exploded outward in a perfect circle, creating a barrier of fire 20 feet high that separated her from the panicking crowd. She stepped down from what remained of the platform, her bare feet touching ground that scorched black beneath her steps, and the fire followed her like a loyal pet. She walked toward the royal platform with slow, deliberate steps, and the sea of people parted before her, too terrified to do anything but scramble out of her path. Kieran's guards drew their weapons, forming a defensive line, but he raised his hand to stop them. Something told him that steel and claws would be useless against someone who commanded fire itself, and more importantly, his wolf was howling at him to protect her, not fight her, to get between her and any threat, even though she was clearly the most dangerous person in this courtyard. When Alara stood at the base of the platform stairs, the flames around her finally dimmed, though they didn't extinguish completely, dancing across her shoulders and wrists like living jewelry. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a resonance of power that made every alpha present want to bare their throat in submission. I am Alara Ignis, last daughter of the flame, heir to the dynasty your ancestors murdered in their beds. I am the Omega you threw away like trash, the servant you never saw, the innocent you condemned without trial. The fire has judged me and found me worthy, and now I stand before you with a choice. I can let these flames consume everything you have built on the ashes of my family, or you can help me find the vipers in your nest who tried to kill me before I could awaken. Choose quickly, Alpha King, because my mercy is as finite as my patience. Kieran descended the platform stairs slowly, his elite guards protesting behind him. But he ignored them. When he reached the ground level, he was close enough to see the tear tracks on her face, evidence that beneath the power and righteous fury was still a young woman who had suffered greatly and deserved better than what his kingdom had given her. His wolf was demanding he touch her, claim her, protect her. But the man knew that trust would have to be earned after what he had done. He dropped to one knee before her, and the entire courtyard gasped in shock because the Alpha King knelt for no one, not even visiting dignitaries or allied pack leaders. "I was wrong," he said clearly enough for all to hear. "I condemned you without proper investigation, without giving you chance to defend yourself. And for that, I offer my life in recompense. But if you allow me to live, I swear on my crown and my wolf that I will find who did this to you, and they will burn in the same flames that protected you." Ilara stared down at him, emotions warring across her face, anger and pain, and something else, something that made her breath catch and her flames flicker uncertainly. She could feel it too, he realized, the bond pulling between them like a golden thread, trying to tie their souls together despite everything. She could kill him. Right now, probably should kill him after he had so callously ordered her death. But the look in her eyes said she was searching for something, some reason to believe his words were more than survival instinct. Finally she spoke, her voice softer, but no less powerful. "I accept your oath, but know this. I will not be your dirty secret or your political inconvenience. If we are to work together, you will treat me as an equal, not as an omega to be hidden away. And when we find the conspirators, I will be the one to judge them, because this is my birthright and my vengeance to claim." He nodded, still kneeling, and held out his hand to her. She looked at it for a long moment before placing her smaller hand in his, and the moment their skin touched, both of them gasped as power surged between them. The mate bond, already straining to connect them fully, blazed to life with intensity that made Kieran's wolf howl in triumph and Ilara's flames dance higher. This was dangerous. Both of them knew it, to trust the bond when they barely knew each other, and had every reason for mistrust. But neither could deny the rightness of that touch, the sense of coming home to something they had been searching for without knowing it. If this tale of fire and fate has captured your imagination, don't forget to leave a comment below telling us what you think will happen next. Will Ilara and Kieran find the conspirators before they strike again? Can love grow between two souls bound by destiny, but divided by bloody history? The following weeks transformed the palace from a place of rigid hierarchy into something resembling a war camp as Kieran and Ilara worked together to unravel the conspiracy. He had installed her in the royal wing, giving her a suite of rooms that had belonged to visiting royalty, and assigned his most trusted guards to her protection, though she barely needed it. Anyone who approached her with ill intent found themselves facing a wall of flames that appeared from nowhere, and servants quickly learned that the small Omega, who used to scrub their floors, now commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Ilara threw herself into learning everything about her heritage, spending long hours in the royal library, reading accounts of the Ignis dynasty, learning that her power was not just fire manipulation, but something deeper, the ability to see truth through flame, to burn away lies and deception until only reality remained. Kieran found himself drawn to the library more and more often, ostensibly to help with the investigation, but truthfully because being near her had become a need he couldn't explain or deny. They would sit across from each other at the massive oak table, surrounded by ancient texts and scrolls, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk about more than just conspiracy and murder. She told him about growing up invisible, about the hunger and loneliness and casual cruelty that had been her constant companions. He told her about the weight of the crown, about becoming king at 20 after his father died in battle, about the isolation of power and the constant fear that showing weakness would invite challenge. They were both prisoners of their positions in different ways, and in the quiet of those late-night conversations, something genuine began to grow between them. Fragile, but real. The investigation revealed rot at the highest levels of Kieran's government. His chief advisor, Lord Matthias, had been 12 years old when the Ignis dynasty fell, son of one of the rebellion leaders who helped Kieran's ancestor take power. His beta commander, Thorn, came from a family that had been elevated from nothing to nobility as reward for their part in the massacre. Both men had access to the intelligence networks, the resources, and the motivation to ensure no Ignis heir ever threatened their family's positions. The poison found in Alara's quarters had come from the royal stores, accessible only to the highest ranking officials. The letters of treason had been written in a hand that matched samples from Lord Matthias's personal correspondence once Alara used her flames to reveal the magical forgery that had disguised the writing. Confronting them required careful planning because both men commanded significant loyalty among the nobility and military. Kieran couldn't simply execute them without proof that would satisfy the Pack Council, and even then, their families might rebel, plunging the kingdom into civil war. Alara proposed a solution that was both elegant and terrifying. She would call a Grand Council, invoking her right as an Ignis heir to challenge the legitimacy of the current rule. But instead of demanding the throne, she would offer to use her fire to reveal truth, to let the flames judge every member of the council and show the pack who served with honor and who conspired in shadow. It was a massive risk, because it would expose her vulnerability to attack, but it would also demonstrate power and confidence that might discourage resistance. The Grand Council convened in the throne room. Every major noble family and pack leader summoned to witness what many expected to be a challenge for the crown. Kieran sat on his throne with Alara standing at his right hand, a position traditionally reserved for the queen, and the statement was not lost on anyone. Lord Matthias and Commander Thorn stood near the front, their faces carefully neutral, but Kieran could smell the sour tang of their anxiety. Alara stepped forward, and flames erupted around the room in a perfect circle, creating a barrier that prevented anyone from entering or leaving. She spoke with the voice of ancient authority, explaining the attempt on her life, the conspiracy to prevent an Ignis heir from claiming their birthright, and her intention to use the sacred flames of truth to reveal the guilty. One by one, she called council members forward, and when they placed their hands in the flames, she summoned, the fire would either burn gently, confirming their innocence, or surge violently, marking them as liars and traitors. The process took hours, and with each revelation, the conspiracy unfolded in greater detail. Lord Matthias had orchestrated the entire plot, using his network of spies to monitor potential Ignis descendants for decades, eliminating them quietly before they could manifest powers. Alara had escaped his notice because she had no wolf and seemed completely powerless, but 3 months ago, something had changed. She had touched a candle in her servant quarters, and the flame had leaped to her hand without burning. A small flicker of power that she had dismissed as imagination. One of Matthias's spies had witnessed it and reported back, setting the execution plot in motion. Commander Thorn had provided the military resources, the guards who planted evidence, the executioner who was supposed to ensure the flames actually killed her by dosing the accelerants, with poison that would overcome even Ignis immunity. When Thorn placed his hands in the judgment flames, they revealed something even darker, a plan to assassinate Kieran immediately after Alara's execution, and blame it on her fictional co-conspirators, allowing Matthias to seize power as regent until a suitable heir could be chosen, meaning one of his own bloodline. The throne room erupted in outrage, as nobles who had served faithfully for years learned they had been manipulated by men they trusted, and the families of Matthias and Thorn immediately began distancing themselves, denouncing the traitors to save their own positions. Kieran stood and pronounced judgment. For conspiracy to commit murder, regicide, and crimes against the crown, both men were sentenced to death, but he looked to Alara to carry out the sentence. This was her right, her vengeance, and he would not take it from her. She called the flames, and they came eagerly, consuming both traitors in seconds, burning so hot and fast that there wasn't even time for screaming, just 2 pillars of white fire and then ash. When it was done, she turned to the assembled council and spoke words that would reshape the kingdom. I do not claim the throne that was my family's, because I have seen what Kieran builds here, and it is worthy. but I will not fade into shadow to make others comfortable. I claim my place as his equal, his partner in ruling, and together we will root out every remnant of the corruption that has poisoned this kingdom. Any who cannot accept this may leave now with their honor intact, but those who stay will swear loyalty not just to the Alpha King, but to the Ignis flame that stands beside him. The council to a person knelt and swore the new oath. Some did it out of genuine respect, others from fear, but all recognized that refusing would mean standing against power that could reduce them to ash. Kieran watched Alara accept their vows with grace and authority that seemed impossible for someone who had been a servant just weeks ago, and his wolf purred with satisfaction that their mate was strong enough to rule beside them. When the ceremony ended and they retired to the private royal chambers, the weight of what they had accomplished and what it meant for their future hung heavy in the air between them. Alara stood by the window, looking out over the city that now knew her name and feared her power, and she felt Kieran approach from behind, his presence a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. They had been dancing around the mate bond for weeks, acknowledging it existed, but not acting on it, both afraid of rushing into something neither fully understood. But tonight, after standing together against conspiracy and claiming their joint authority, the bond felt different, less like a trap, and more like a choice they were both ready to make. She turned to face him, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "I know I don't deserve you," he said quietly, his usual authority replaced by vulnerable honesty. "I failed you in the worst way possible, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. But if you give me the chance, I will spend every day proving that you can trust me, that we can build something real beyond just duty and destiny." She reached up and cupped his face, her touch gentle despite the power that hummed beneath her skin. "You made a terrible mistake," she agreed, "and I won't pretend it doesn't hurt or that I've completely forgiven you. But I've seen who you are in these past weeks, how you work tirelessly for your people, how you listen to advice even when it contradicts what you want to hear, how you've treated me as an equal even though your pride must have struggled with it. You're not perfect, Kieran, but you're trying to be better, and that matters more than anything." The bond pulled them together, and when their lips met, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, like two halves of a whole finally reunited after being separated for lifetimes. The following months saw sweeping reforms as Alara and Kieran worked together to dismantle the corrupt systems that had allowed the conspiracy to flourish. Laws were rewritten to protect Omegas and wolves without power, ensuring they had legal recourse against abuse and opportunities for education and advancement. The orphanages where Alara had suffered were completely restructured, with oversight committees that included former orphans, who understood what needed to change. Positions of power were no longer inherited automatically, but required demonstrated competence and regular review. It was radical, transformative work that made them enemies among the old guard nobility. But it also won them fierce loyalty from the common wolves who had never had a voice before. Alara's powers grew stronger with training and practice. She learned to call fire in forms ranging from gentle warmth to devastating infernos, to see through illusions and magical deceptions, to share her immunity with others by extending her flames around them as protection. Ancient texts revealed that Ignis rulers had once used their powers to forge unbreakable alliances, literally binding oaths with flames that would burn oathbreakers from within. She used this ability sparingly, only for the most serious matters, but its existence ensured that corruption would think twice before taking root again. The people began to see her not as a threat, but as a guardian, the flame that purified their kingdom and made it stronger. Kieran found that ruling beside Alara made him a better king. She challenged his assumptions, pointed out blind spots in his thinking, and brought perspectives he would never have considered from his position of privilege. When he wanted to respond to problems with force, she showed him diplomatic solutions. When she wanted to burn everything down and rebuild from scratch, he reminded her that change must be sustainable, to last. They balanced each other, fire and steel, passion and discipline, and together they forged something greater than either could achieve alone. The mate bond deepened beyond physical attraction or mystical connection into genuine partnership built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. On their wedding day, a year after she had stepped into flames and emerged reborn, the entire kingdom celebrated. The ceremony combined ancient Ignis traditions with modern pack rituals, symbolizing the union of past and present, old power and new vision. Alara wore a gown that seemed woven from flames themselves, constantly shifting colors from gold to crimson to white, and the crown placed on her head was forged from metal that had been heated in her own fire and shaped by Kieran's hands, a collaboration that represented everything they were building together. When they exchanged vows, speaking promises of loyalty, trust, and eternal partnership, the flames that appeared around them burned in, colors no one had ever seen, blues and purples and greens dancing with the traditional reds and golds, as if the fire itself was celebrating this impossible union. Their rule became legendary, the Alpha King and his Flame Queen, partners who transformed a kingdom built on blood and betrayal into something worthy of the loyalty it demanded. They faced challenges, attempted coups from bitter nobles, border conflicts with rival packs, natural disasters and political intrigue, but they faced everything together, never allowing the pressures of the crown to divide them. Alara never forgot what it felt like to be powerless and invisible, and she used her position to ensure no one else would suffer as she had. Kieran never forgot the shame of condemning an innocent, and he reformed the justice system to require evidence and fair trials for all, regardless of rank or status. Years later, when their first child was born, a daughter who manifested both alpha authority and Ignis flames. From her first breath, the entire kingdom understood that a new era had truly begun. This child represented the future they were building, where power came from within rather than being determined by birth, where strength meant protecting the weak rather than exploiting them, where the flames of the past could illuminate the path forward instead of consuming it. Alara held her daughter and whispered the names of her ancestors, ensuring they would not be forgotten, while Kieran stood beside them, radiating pride and protective fierce devotion, his wolf finally at peace because his mate and child were safe and his kingdom was just. The Omega, who had once been nothing, who had walked into fire expecting only death, had become the flame that transformed an entire kingdom. And the king who had condemned her, who had nearly destroyed the best thing that would ever happen to him, had learned that true strength meant admitting mistakes and fighting to be worthy of forgiveness. Together, they proved that even from the ashes of terrible wrongs, something beautiful could grow, that destiny was not chains, but opportunity, and that love strong enough to burn away the past could forge a future brighter than any flame. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of fire, redemption, and love that conquered the weight of bloody history. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next tale of supernatural romance and fated bonds. Share your thoughts in the comments about what moved you most, and until next time, may you find the courage to walk through your own fires and emerge transformed.